So going back to Grandma's tales, some of her tales would involve stories of when she was a child and how they used to go in the summer, particularly down to the river, and they might do a bit of fishing with a net or just paddling and splashing each other, that sort of thing, which I also did as a child to a certain extent. But it brings me to think of all the other activities that I suppose before there was television particularly, but even afterwards, that we used to do, quite a few of which people don't seem to do anymore. And one of them that I didn't personally do, but which was very common, and certainly my father was very keen on it, was what seems to be known now as wild swimming, that is, swimming in the river or a lake. Certainly Dad would tell me that when he was young, it was very, very popular, particularly amongst boys, that was a standard summer activity was to swim in the river. And we've got many family photographs from all sides of the family where they would go perhaps camping by the river, and there's photographs of the whole family stood in the river, no doubt that sort of perhaps they did a bit of swimming, but just generally enjoying the river. And I think this has become perhaps a bit of a victim of political correctness. Don't go in the river because you might never get out. Whereas, of course, before it was get in the river while we watch you and can save you. So you learn what's dangerous and what's not, and learn how to swim, learn what to look for any obstructions under the water, make sure you can see the bottom of the river, make sure you don't get cold. If you do, you must get out immediately. All of these various lessons. And there's a lot more lessons as to what's safe and what's not, when to go in a river. I don't think they teach children anymore. They might teach them to swim, but even that's a bit half-hearted. Certainly in primary school, even if they do learn to swim, they're expected to swim in a swimming pool. They don't learn anything about river swimming. If you ever fell into a river, I don't think there's so many children, certainly from what they would learn at school, would really have much of a clue. They wouldn't know whether it was safe to go in or not. Just wouldn't have river sense. You only learn to ride a bike safely on the road by supervisedly riding a bike. First you learn how to ride the bike, yes, but you must also learn to ride it on the road. And if you're going to learn to swim in a river, you need to learn to swim in a river or a lake or the sea. There are different rules. Now in the sea we used to go in, but that was like a once a year thing when we would go on holiday. Dad was fanatical about swimming. I think he was very keen on it as a child, and it's the crime that happened to him when he was in the RAF in Palestine. Was the Jews fired at them while they were swimming. It didn't hit anybody. It may or may not have intended to hit people, but they were then banned from swimming, and Dad was always sure that he wasn't going to be stopped being able to go to swim by that. Anyway, that's one of the many activities, and I think it's a shame that, and it does seem to be in England in particular, that it's highly discouraged. People do go swimming on the continent. I know it's warmer and you can do it more often, but it's a cultural thing, a change that's been enforced, I think, on particularly English boys, that you can't go in a river. It's banned here, it's banned there. I do remember, for example, when I was staying with Grandma, that there was the old quarry just round the corner with a dangerous drop into a lake that formed in the old quarry pit. We were allowed to play, not in the quarry itself, but we were allowed to play by the water because it was assumed that we had enough sense not to go in it, given that it was dangerous water. There was no way out of it. You couldn't see the bottom. It had everything wrong with it. But we weren't told not to go anywhere near it at all. That's one activity anyway. We did go sometimes to the lido. Lido is basically an outdoor swimming pool, above all with a diving board. Watching people dive was perhaps the main attraction. Watching people, in my case, certainly dive was one of the main attractions. As I remember, I think we used to have a bit of a picnic there and so on. It was an okay Sunday afternoon 2 or 3 times a year. But there were lots of other things that we did, some occasionally, some often. I've been to the circus a couple of times. Didn't much like clowns personally, but the rest of it was okay. Okay, though. It was an interesting thing. It wasn't a sort of super exciting thing. As regards seeing animals, I think I prefer the zoo, which we also did once a year, perhaps. Another once a year thing was what was known as the Enderby Wake, which was a fun fair. It was always the same. There was dodgems. There was I think that there was like 4 seats on a set of 4. So there was 4 that went round on like a cross piece that went round. So there was 16 seats, or 16 double seats altogether. So you went round while you were going round. So you sort of did this effect. That was okay. The dodgems were okay. I used to love the roll a penny, where you'd roll a penny down and have to get it into a square, and you'd win 2pence, 6pence, depending where the square was. You saw your friends there. They played great music there. Music wasn't so available in those days, so they would play the latest pop music and loud. So that was perhaps almost a major part of the attraction, because you couldn't afford to go on things all that much. You'd have to spend a lot of time watching other people going on, or you'd run out of money because you weren't given that much. Dad used to take me to the Speedway racing in Leicester. Quite often, I suppose. Again, that maybe half a dozen times a year, certainly. I used to love the smell and the kicking up of the sand as they went round. We used to sort of support the Leicester team, whose name I've forgotten. Maybe it was the Foxes. It might have been. I'm not sure. But it commonly against, it seemed to be against Coventry. That was certainly the favourite one for Dad to go to. That they were the local rivals that Leicester had to beat Coventry, and they didn't very often, to be honest. There was greyhound racing, which Dad had no interest in really, so we didn't go to that. But he did have an interest in motorbikes in other ways as well. We went to Mallory Park sometimes. That's a sort of twice a year thing, perhaps. Usually it was for motorbike racing, particularly motorbike and sidecar racing. I thought that was perhaps the most exciting, where the person on the side could go, well, it's not exactly a sidecar, it was a platform really, used to lean right out as they went round the corner. It looked, at least, probably was, really dangerous. I used to quite enjoy that. We did a few times go to, I don't know what it's called, where motorbikes go up a very steep hill. I think it's only about twice we actually went to see that live. You used to watch it on the television later on, a time or two. They just tried to get to the top of the hill, and the hill's so steep that it's very, very difficult. Not so good, really, I didn't think. But at one time, once we had a car, a favourite thing of Dad's was to go to scrapyards looking for bits and pieces, or indeed car sales places, looking not to buy another car, but to look at the different cars and the prices. But he would get bits from the scrapyard from time to time. I had a trolley, it was 4 wheels from an old pram or something, and you'd go down the hill, you'd get your friend to give you a push, and you'd jump on the back, and we'd go down the hill in the avenue around the back. Really dangerous again, I suppose, in principle, because it comes to a T-junction at the bottom, and there's no real way you'd stop. You had to turn the corner. stopped doing it when I did come off, turning the corner very sharply because something was coming. Scraped my leg a bit. It wasn't that serious. The pub, I suppose, was another one. We used to go down to the pub down the village. As a child, you weren't allowed into the bar. So you went in the skittle alley. So there were skittles, which were wooden skittles. There was 9 skittles and wooden balls that you threw at them, and they were available to play. You didn't pay. It was you could just have a go. So we used to try and knock the skittles down every so often. It's quite different to 10-pin bowling. It's a different skill altogether. You lob the ball rather than roll it. Dad would sometimes leave me with lemon and lime or something and go into the bar to play bar billiards. You could sort of peek through the door and see them playing, but you weren't allowed in. It's on like a table, and there's like mushrooms that stand up that you have to not knock down, if I remember right. I never got to play it myself. I only saw it played. I can't really remember the rules, but there's a real skill, I know, in throwing the cheese, as it was called, which is a flat wooden disc, I suppose. You have to throw it from a distance. It had to obviously go on the table, but it had to sort of just go on the table. I don't really remember it beyond that exactly how it worked. We used to go for walks occasionally. That would usually be a walk to a neighbouring village, have a drink in the pub and walk back of a Sunday morning, that kind of a thing. But they were interesting walks because you get to learn the different plants. Certainly we saw plenty of keck, as we called it, which is, I suppose, the proper name is cow parsley. You pick it up and tip things with it. It's sort of amusing as a child. Fishing was another activity, but I only had a net and caught minnows just for the shears. You put them back just for the pleasure of catching them in the river. We never did hardly any rod and line fishing of any kind, although it's very, very popular thing amongst the more distant relatives, but Dad wasn't really interested in fishing. Gardening, of course, was another thing. Even that's actually a pleasure sometimes. We used to grow vegetables in the garden, particularly runner beans were Dad's main thing, but we grow most of the other vegetables as well. And there was, of course, the lawn to mow and the hedge to trim, but they're just jobs really. But the growing of the vegetables was a bit of a pleasure. There was the Narborough Fete, the small bit that was left of it. I said in a previous one that it was very big when you had to raise money for the hospital, but it was a smaller affair. But well, there was all sorts of things to do there. You'd have one go on this, one go on that. It passed an afternoon if it wasn't raining, that's for sure. We went to the Working Men's Club quite often at one time. They used to play 2 or 3 sessions of bingo to raise a bit of money. You had to pay a yearly membership, but the drink was cheap, and there was free entertainment. It varied. They had comedians and things, but later on it was mostly the local pop group. They would copy, well, at that time it was Rolling Stones and Beatles songs, that kind of thing. And they were quite good, actually. I quite enjoyed that. I suppose that's really it for this time. So I'll say bye for now.